Hi guys, I hope you are all really well. Firstly, if you are new to the channel, please do click subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, please do click like. Remember, particularly with today's video, most of what we're talking about is available in the grammar podcasts, which will take you in an organized fashion from the beginning of verbs all the way to the very top, okay? As you know, I'm kind of having a bit of a cleanup session at the moment and just answering lots of people's questions. Can I also remind you, there is a video on this being edited. I am doing a group class again in the September, but it will be paid in advance and people that have applied in advance to do it. It won't be like a live, me just switching on the YouTube and answering questions like before. It will be people that are asking to come along. But I will do this kind of thing in this, whatever your level. So for some of you, this is a very easy part of grammar, and for other people, this is a little bit tricky. Please remember, we all start at different stages when we come to the channel, and the fact is, some of the people that I remember teaching this, you now see doing the more advanced classes. So some of the people that you all go, wow, they do such brilliant work, I remember teaching them this. So, everything happens when it's meant to happen. So this is answering Kapil's question. So Kapil basically said, what's going on with this, être verb business? When do I use them? He was trying to say things like I have gone, j'ai, allé, all of this, all of this, all of this. So let's just have a very quick conversation about what we're doing here. So first things first. You need to understand what an auxiliary verb is. An auxiliary verb is when you use another verb to create the tense that you are talking about. So for example, I have spoken. The main verb is speak, but you are using have in the middle, if you want to think about it, to create the tense that you need. I had spoken would do exactly the same thing. I will have spoken. So they are verbs within your tense required to make the tense other than the main verb. Yeah, so to sleep, she has slept. Has is your auxiliary verb. And the point that Kapil is referring to is that in French, these are either the verb to have, avoir, j'ai, tu as, il a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont, j'ai, tu as, il a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont, in that tense, but we'll talk about that in a moment, or être, je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, in that tense, again, and we'll talk about that in a moment, okay? Next idea then, be very careful that you even know the tense that you're talking about. So for example, Kapil says he has a problem with the simple past. By definition, the simple past, simple in grammar doesn't mean easy, it means one verb word. So for example, the simple future in French is one verb word. Il mangera, tu mangeras, on mangera, as opposed to je vais manger, for example. So simple pasts mean, which is our most common prétrit form of using the past in English, is like I spoke, he went, Kapil asked, Luke left. This is the simple past. Now let's be very clear. In French, the simple past, le passé simple, is reserved for very formal usage and mostly books. So in other words, you don't need that. If you were saying, Kapil, as per the question that you sent me over WhatsApp, I went, you would need to say I have gone. Yeah, so are we absolutely clear? So when we talk about these être verbs, or any verb with an auxiliary, okay, we are fundamentally talking about 6 different spoken systems, and I think that's really useful. This is on the grammar podcast. This is when you basically learn the order present, was, will, would, subjunctive, infinitive, present, was, will, would, subjunctive, infinitive on the auxiliary. So if we took a standard verb, he speaks, il parle, present, il parle, he was speaking, il parlera, he will speak, il parlerait, he would speak. Subjunctive, which if you don't understand is fine, I very much doubt you do if you are watching this video. It's just for you to notice there are all these conjugations with no auxiliary. So, it's interesting that he's speaking. Alors, voilà, il est intéressant qu'il parle, sounds the same at the moment. And then the auxiliary in the infinitive, so after having spoken, après avoir parlé. If you don't understand that one, go back through my videos, about 20 videos ago, and there's a video explaining the infinitives. So then sorry, I apologize, the infinitive on the auxiliary, the infinitive with no auxiliary, avant de parler, before speaking. Then you'd have the 6 conversationally useful versions of language where you have an auxiliary couple, not just your I have gone. So for example, he spoke, il a parlé. Notice he spoke, he has spoken. The auxiliary verb there is in the present. Yeah, so although the whole thing is in the past, our auxiliary verb is in the present. Il avait parlé, he had spoken. Although the whole thing is in the further past, the pluperfect, the plus que parfait, the auxiliary verb is in the was. He will have spoken. The auxiliary verb is in the will, the future, the simple future. He would have spoken, il aurait parlé. The auxiliary verb is in the conditional. Subjunctive qu'il ait parlé, the auxiliary verb is in the subjunctive. Après avoir parlé, the auxiliary verb is in the infinitive. So in other words, Capel, just get your mind ready. You are going to need to know present, was, tense, imperfect, because was isn't always imperfect, but we say present, was, will, would, subjunctive and infinitive of the auxiliary. And that then means that your past participle isn't going to change. So in all of those bottom 6, Capel, so if you said il mange, il mange, il mangera, il mangerait, il est intéressant qu'il mange, whatever, avant de manger. There's no auxiliary, there's no have or be. And in the bottom 6, it's going to be the verb to be or the verb to have across the whole range. So if your verb uses be, use be all the way across. If your verb uses have, use have all the way across. But your past participle, your last word, will be the same, Capel. So that's the first idea to talk about. Do we know which tense we're using? Because there's very much a problem when people learn this, that they go, oh yeah, je suis allé, vous êtes parti, and I'm like, that's one tense that's using this. If your verb is a be verb, a Naître verb, you're going to have to do that across another, well, in spoken French, another 5 systems. The next idea we want to talk about is that when people talk about Être verbs, they always talk about this mnemonic, this memory thing, Dr. Mrs. P. van der Tramp. Now, I'd far rather let's get something we can use. Let's get this magnesium body spray, which is really good if you're depleted in anything. So a lot of languages have relationships with have and be as an auxiliary verb. You know, German, Spanish, wherever you're coming from, German, Italian, Spanish, no. But there are other European languages that you might have done where we do have this going on. The deal in French is less for you to think of it as an être verb of motion, because that's crap. Because, you know, walking is motion, running is motion. So if your verbs in any way, shape or form are telling you how you're moving rather than the fact that you are, probably a sign that it's not going to be in the middle, it's going to be have. So if you actually look at this basic idea, go up, go down, leave, return. You know, it's very much basically describing the fact that you've moved. Go, come, you know. So that's a better idea. You know, the very first movement you do to be born, the very last movement you do to die, to not move, to stay, which always confuses people. So that's a better idea rather than thinking verb of motion. Être verb of motion is a bit of a misnomer, yeah, a bit of a silly thing to say. But if you wanted to use the Dr. Mrs. P. van der Tramp, so that is a way to remember all of these verbs. So you would have, let me see if I can do it without checking. So devenir, revenir, Mrs. so monter, retourner, sortir, venir, aller, naître, that'd be devenir, no, we've had devenir, descendre, entrer, revenir have we had, retourner, rentrer, tramp, tombé, to fall, which bothers people. Another one that comes, retourner have we had, revenir have we had, yeah. Tramp, A. If we've not had allé already, we'll have arrivé, M. We've not yet had monté. We've had Mrs. already, so mourir, yeah. And P again at the end. If we've not yet had, have we had passé? Yeah, no, we haven't had passé. So that's basically your list. So your verbs are going to be, hang on, let me be a bit more organised. Dr. Mrs. van der, yeah, so devenir, to become, revenir, to come back. There's 3 verbs to come back. Monter to go up, rester to stay, sortir to go out, partir to leave, venir to come, arrivé to arrive, naître to be born, descendre to go down, entrer to enter, rentrer to go home, tombé to fall down, to fall, retourner to go back. You can use these in other slightly different versions, but these are the main translations. Allé to go, mourir to die, and passer to pass in front of, all right, pass by. Next idea. Within that, then, couple, you will notice, and this is what was confusing you according to your WhatsApp, that you're doing your other systems, like I'm learning the present, I'm learning this. You can still use your A and your soft hard division with those verbs. So for example, if you were doing the grammar podcasts, you know, arrivé is an A verb. Arrive, 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 arrivons, arrivé, arrive. J'arrive, tu arrives, il arrive, nous arrivons, vous arrivez, ils arrivent. Partir, or sortir there, or descendre, are soft hard verbs. Part, partant, partez, part. That hurts, Luke, don't do it. Sort, sortant, sortez, sorte. Descend, descendons, descendez, descendre. So you still have this division of soft, hard verbs and A verbs. That's got nothing to do per se with whether or not it's going to use have or be in the middle. Are we quite clear on that? So in other words then, all of those verbs, if you wanted to use them in the interpretation that's been given, you would pop be in the middle in the present tense, in the was tense, in the will tense, etc. So if you think he has eaten, or he ate, but he has eaten, so il a mangé, the whole thing is in the past couple, but we are popping be, shut up Luke, we are popping the have in the present tense. He has, il a, it's the present tense. You're making the past tense from the present tense. He has brown hair, il a, yeah, les cheveux marrons, he has a blue t-shirt, you know, that's present tense. He has brown eyes. He has eaten, il a mangé. We use the same verb in the middle, the same auxiliary verb as the verb to have. Be very careful, not all languages will do that, for example. Yeah, some, like Italian, will use the standard verb for have. Spanish, for example, will use haber. It will use a different verb to conjugate. So be careful what your language background is in your own language, whether you use an auxiliary verb, which is the same verb as to have. Okay, so what we're saying then is that your standard past will use the present in the middle. Now that could be the verb to be in the present. So any one of those verbs you've just done with the translation you've just come across, if you wanted to pop it in the past, so for example, he left, so the verb partir, so he has left, instead of saying il a parti, you will say il est parti, est, the verb to be. Instead of saying, for example, they, what should we say, they went, so instead of saying ils ont, you'll say ils sont, okay, ils sont, all right, because you're going to use the verb to be in the middle. And consequently, any of the other 5 auxiliaries that you're going to be using in spoken French will stick to that. So for example, he left, il est parti, the verb to be in the present tense. He had left, il était parti, the verb to be in the was tense, even though the whole thing is in the had tense. He will have left, il sera parti, il serait parti, qu'il soit parti, subjunctive. So be will be be across the whole of those, you know, all of those choices, couple. If you don't understand those tenses, can I strongly, guys, recommend that you get the No More Than 4 podcasts, which are the grammar podcasts which explain every tense and how to formulate it in 4 minutes, no more than 4 minutes, and then 4 minutes of examples per tense. And you can work your way through those tenses really, really quickly and then follow the material on the channel. So let's talk some other ideas that always happen around some of the problems and, you know, just general problems with être verbs. So one problem is that you've got this idea of spelling that comes up. So can I please remind you that spelling these verbs will involve adding an E and an S if they are feminine or plural, and an E and an S if they are both feminine and plural. So for example, I left, je suis parti. I'm conjugating it with être, obviously. I left, je suis parti. I have left, the same thing, je suis parti. P-A-R-T-I. If a woman said I left, je suis parti, she would write P-A-O, and anybody who identifies as female would be P-A-R-T-I-E. Okay? So if two women left, elles sont parties, P-A-R-T-I-E-S, E and an S on the end, okay? You're going to see that ever such a great deal, okay? The only time out of those verbs it's going to have an effect on the pronunciation is with die. So she died, elle est morte, because the E will sound your T. They died, ils sont morts, M-O-R-T-S, for example. You won't be hearing that T, okay? Another idea about être verbs which often confuses people, you are going to be seeing those verbs there sometimes with have, because certain verbs on that list can be conjugated with have in a slightly different way. So for example, I went up, je suis monté, I put up the photograph, j'ai monté la photo with the normal have. Yeah. I left, I went out, je suis sorti, I took out my whatever keys, j'ai sorti from my bag, j'ai sorti, yeah, here's my bag, take out the keys, j'ai sorti mes clés, j'ai sorti mes clés. You know, it's not me going out. I spent, j'ai passé, I spent an hour with my friends, j'ai passé une heure avec mes amis. I'm using have there, yeah? So the same verbs that you were going to physically see, not all of them, but some of them can be written with a have rather than a be. Another idea to be very aware of now that we're having a little extra verb refresh is some of those verbs have a liaison, all right? So je suis allé versus je suis allé. Il est allé versus il est allé. Yeah, both are formally correct. I tend to pronounce the liaisons myself. Just be very mindful that you will hear both. So for example, this is going to happen when the liaison takes place between your auxiliary verb, the verb in the middle, and the past participle, the last verb, the verb at the end. So for example, if that's a vowel, so they arrived, ils sont arrivés versus ils sont arrivés. You will hear both, okay? Another thing to be very much aware of is the pronunciation of they are versus they have. So they have, ils ont, with like a Z sound, okay? They are, ils sont, because a single S in French at the beginning of a word will give me a S, and a single S in French at the end of a word when it's got a liaison to another vowel will give me a Z, okay? So for example, you are here, tu es ici, T-U-E-S-I will be pronounced as ici. So because of that then, you're going to get a lot of these, yes, you're going to get, for example, ils ont and ils sont. Be very mindful that some of the have verb sounds like some of the be verb. J'ai, I have, A-I, il est, E-S-T. Yeah, and further down the line, you'll be coming across the subjunctive. Il est, he has, in the subjunctive, AIT, so be very clear which verb you're on. Another idea which I think is always useful when talking about these is you are very, very commonly going to see verbs conjugated with be in the middle, and they won't be these verbs of motion. I despise the term verbs of motion, but you know what I'm on about. There won't be these verbs. So for example, if you said anything predominantly like I said to myself, je me suis dit, that reflexive action of saying something to myself, je me suis dit, I'm using be there. So I said, j'ai dit, normal verb, I have said, you know, you have said, he said, whatever. If that person does something to themselves, reflexively, that will take on the be verb, even if it's a verb that normally capital doesn't even have anything to do with be. So for example, she spoke, elle a parlé, she spoke to herself, elle sait parler. We've got the reflexive pronoun and the verb to be. So you will visibly see the verb to be as an auxiliary with verbs that you think, I had no idea that that was a be verb. It's not a be verb, you're just doing it because there's that reflexive pronoun there. And again, or reciprocal, like they gave each other a present, ils se sont donné un cadeau. You know, if you don't understand that, then get to the podcasts that are underneath. Then you're going to be seeing the be verbs. It doesn't mean it's a be verb. It means you're just conjugating it with be because you are reflexively or reciprocally or something to that effect, you know, using that verb. Likewise, if you're getting used to seeing be, you will sometimes see verbs on the end of the verb to be, but be careful because they are adjectives. So for example, I am married, je suis marié. I got married, je me suis marié. So you're seeing je suis marié. You're seeing, you know, I got married, which is a reflexive verb anyway, but I'm married. You're thinking, oh, marié, it's got an E acute on the end, it's a verb. No, it's an adjective. So not all of them, I have to be very, very clear, but most of the time in English, if you have an ed on the end of your past participle, it's a sign that it comes from a verb, and therefore in French it will be the past participle of the same verb. So for example, to tire, fatigué, I am tired, je suis fatigué. It doesn't mean fatigué is a be verb. If something tired you, that tired me, ça m'a, fatigué would have in the middle. But if you're using a verb to make your adjective, to make your describing word, yeah, which is passively, that verb is being done to you. I am motivated, je suis motivé. M-O-T-I-V-E acute. Visually looks pretty darn similar to je suis monté, I went up. But motivé is not a be verb. Yeah, I motivated, whatever, the kids, whatever the students, j'ai motivé. So be very careful, that's going to look like a be verb, but it's not a be verb. So an overview then, Kappa, what you need to get used to doing is every single time you jump into your tense, decide, first of all, if it needs an auxiliary. Yeah, get the grammar podcast. Or watch them on here, but it's a little bit, it's not always in the correct order on here. It's the videos come as they come. Decide whether you are in a be verb or not. Yeah. Then choose the appropriate be verb. But your most common form of the past in French is going to have the auxiliary in the verb to be in the present. So for example, Luc spoke, Luc a parlé, Luc left, Luc est parti. You know, they ate, ils ont mangé, they left, ils sont partis. I hope that makes sense. So very much get used to the fact that when you're learning verbs, of the verbs that you know, to learn 16, 17, whatever it is, verbs right now with be, if somebody's normally at this stage of French, that's quite a lot of verbs, yeah, compared to the whole French language and the verbs that you're going to learn. It's not that many verbs. You know, like, of the verbs you know right now, that seems quite a lot, but you know, it's not going to be that many verbs. It doesn't mean that it's not used. It's used a great deal, because when we anecdotally talk, we jump in and out of the have and the be verbs all the time. So let's just say, so this morning I went, and I'm not even doing this on purpose, I'm just going to literally tell you what happened. So this morning I went to the market. Alors ce matin, je suis allé, I went, so be in the middle, au marché, Borough Market in London, annoyingly, because I wanted to buy a gluten-free pie minster pie, and the bastards had run out. So I took the tube, j'ai pris, have verb, I took, I have taken, but notice I took, I have taken, has to be the same in French, in spoken French. J'ai pris le train. I arrived at the station, I arrived at London Bridge, so je suis arrivé, yeah? Or je suis arrivé if you're being really slangy. Be verb, because it's talking about moving around. I went out, je suis sorti, be verb, okay? I entered the market, je suis entré, whatever, into the market. I spoke with the lady, j'ai parlé. I said, oh God, I've come all the way from West Hampstead, j'ai dit, okay? I ordered a coffee, I went and sat down. No, I had a cup of tea. I ordered a tea round the corner. Alors j'ai commandé, j'ai pris un thé. I bought some like cookie style thing, sugar-free, gluten-free, dairy-free. J'ai acheté, have in the middle, not be in the middle. I spoke with the guy next to me, lovely little old fellow who had bright rainbow-coloured braces. Not braces here, but like, you know, braces on his trousers. Very cool guy. J'ai parlé. I got the bus because I thought, actually, I need to go to Covent Garden to buy something, so I'll do that while I'm here. J'ai pris le bus. I got off. Je suis descendu. There's be. So in an average anecdote, when you're talking about your day and moving around, you are going to kind of get the verb to be quite a lot in the middle. But, you know, there you go. So I hope this has been completely clear. We've spoken about be verbs in the middle. We've spoken about how you're going to have to do it in a different tense. You're going to have to mainly use the present tense. Small thing, if you're doing this and you're at this stage of your learning, guys, remember that when you come into the past participle, that's the third word after the auxiliary, that there are patterns. So if it is an a verb, most of the time, obviously it's just going to be a, e acute. So, you know, manger, j'ai mangé, danser, j'ai dansé, aller, je suis allé, the accent on the end. Ears generally will go to e. Partir, parti, je suis parti, j'ai fini, depends which have or be, but it will generally go to e. Venir, obviously not, je suis venu, a regular one to learn, je suis devenu. Mourir, again, anything RIR is always odd anyway, but je suis mort, we've spoken about that being irregular. Je suis né, yeah, I was born, the odd one, which isn't even I was in French anyway, it's like I got born kind of thing. So notice that your past participles are, you know, in this collection of verbs are going to pretty much be a blend of what you can work out and what you can't work out. But once you know the past participle couple, you can do all of them. So if you know he died, il est mort. You know he had died, il était mort. He will have died, il sera mort. He would have died, il serait mort. I'm sad he died, je suis triste qu'il soit mort. You know all of the past, after dying, après être mort, you know all of the past participles. I hope this was useful. Okay, do please let me know if you guys are interested in the podcast, which will help explain all of this. If you're at the stage where you're having to Google what an Être verb is, get the podcasts. They go all the way through. You know, they really, really are decent. Or it will explain all of this to you much, 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 much more quickly than this, and it will give you a nice system to work off. All right, take care, guys. Do please click like if you enjoyed the video. I do have a copy link underneath. Take care, take care.